one more second. Oopsie.
Okay, and why don't you stop it?
Just one
You
second.
know, just
Okay,
put
I'll forget about my recording.
not these, push that square stops it.
Okay, we're
The
starting.
square with the
Okay, the Rebbe starting.
Okay,
So
ready?
you see the square?
yeah.
Okay, so at the end, you'll push the square and that'll end it.
Okay.
Okay,
Great.
Rebbe, you can take it away.
Okay, I can start?
Yes.
Okay. Mitzvah Kuf Samach Daled. והמצווה 4 ו-6 ומאה היא שזיוונו להסענוס. So the mitzvah, there's a strange thing going on. I have to see exactly in both here in Sefer HaMitzvos and in Minyan HaKotzer, and also in Protei HaMitzvos. The Rambam says that the mitzvah is lehisanus. And lisanus l'chayre means Inui of Achilu and Shisia. However, and you see also, we'll see later, that the Rambam ends off that we call Elad Vorim Ad Sheagil Ho Inui, and that is the mitzvah. The mitzvah is the Inui, and the Rambam says the Inui is Les Anos. The in Mishnah Torah, the question is it just different language, or maybe it's something different going on. The Rambam says in Perek Aleph of Hilchos Shvisas also Mitzvas Aseh Acheres Yesh B'Yom Kippur. That's besides the mitzvah of Shvisa Melacha. V'hi lishbois boy me'achilu shesir. Shenema tanu es nafshei seichem. V'chein laman pia shmua. And then he goes on. So the mitzvah is lishbois me'achilu shesir. It's an Isur of the mitzvah is Shvisa, and Shvisa Machilu Shesiyah, and then Shvisa adds on that there's an Isur also Luchaytz, Ulasuch, Volino, Asasando, Libo, Mitzvah Lishbois, Mikol Elu, Keder Sheshevis Machilu Shesiyah. So I'm not sure if there's a difference over here. The Rambam in Minyan HaMitzvos, and in Minyan HaKotzer, and in the Protei Mitzvos, seems to say that the mitzvah is lehisanos, and here in Mishnah Torah, the mitzvah is shvisa. It might be, but I'm not sure about this, because the Ram is going to present a hekesh over here between a Shabbos, Shabbosim. So the question is, what's the hekesh between? Is the hekesh between Achila and Shisi, the mitzvah of Shvisa, Achilu Shisiya, to the mitzvah of the mitzvah of refraining from Sicha and Shisiya, and Sicha and Luchitza and Nilas Hasando? Or is it a hekesh between the Isa Melacha and the Shvisa from these things of Inui? So in Minyan HaMitzvos here, the Ram says that the hekesh, if you look later, he says, "Ushashvisa muchayeves me'ila pulois kulon." So he says like this: "V'chein bo akabola, shuhu also bilchitza uv'sicha uv'nilas asando v'tashamita." V'ashvisa muchayeves me'ila pulois kulon be'amud boy Shabbat Shabbosin. So he learns out the Isa Chilun Shisiya from Tanu, and he learns out the mitzvah of Shvisa from Sicha and Uchitza and Nilas Hasandal from Shvisa, from Shabbosan. See, here he says in Minyan HaMitzvos, Shabbosan hilochem v'nisan es nafshei seichem. Ki'ilu yoima, it's as if it says, shechoiva boy hashvisa hamayuchedes b'melacha v'ma'asim. There's a hekish between shvisa for melacha v'ashvisa hamayuchedes b'mozan haguf v'kiyumah. Uchein oma Shabbos Shabbosan. So then it means that the hekish, you learn that there's a shvisa not only from Melacha, but also from the other Inuyim, Sicha, L'chitza, and Nilas Hasan, Tashas Hamita. So there's no hekish between Achil and Shisiya. Achil and Shisiya we learn out from Ta'anu, and the same way we have to refrain from Melacha, we have to refrain from a Shvisa Melacha, the Shvisa from Sicha and Rechitza, Tashas Hamita, and Nilas Hasan. So then, in the frame of reference of Sefer HaMitzvos, there's no reason to put Achil and Shisiya in the class of Shvisa, but Achil and Shisiya is from Ta'anu, and if you want a hekesh about Shvisa, it has to be to Melacha. That's what he does over here. I'm not sure the meaning of it is, but I'm telling mechanically that's what happens. But in Mishnah Torah, a very different thing happens. Because in Mishnah Torah he says, Mitzvas Aseh in Perek Aleph Nuch Shvisas also Halacha Dalet. Mitzvas Aseh Acheres Yesh B'Yom HaKippurim V'hi Lishbois Me'achila U'Shisiya. So Achila U'Shisiya is Shvisa. Shenema Tanu Es Nafshei Seichem. But even though it's from Tanu, it's basically Shvisa. V'chein Lomadnu V'Pi HaShmuel is a Pirush Mekubal. She'asa L'Uchotz L'Asuch Olino Es Asando Livo. U'mitzvah Lishbois Mikol Elu. Kederech Sheshoves Me'achilu Shisiya. Shenema Shabbos Shabboson. Shabbos Li'inyan. Shabbos Li'inyan Achilu. V'Shabboson Li'inyan Elu. So the hekish is not to Melacha, but the hekish is to Achil and Shisiya. And Shabbos, and there's an element of Shvis and Shabbos. In a Shvisa of Achila and Shisiya in Shabbos. It's not clear how the Rambam does this, because if you look over here, the mitzvah is from Ta'anu. So I'm not sure how he does this and how Achil and Shisiya come under Shabbosan, but he changes around the hekish the way he presents it in Sefer HaMitzvos. I'm not sure of the meaning of it is, but in Sefer HaMitzvos, I understand the mitzvah of Tainis is from Ta'anu, and if you want a hekesh of Shabbos, there's another Shavisa of Sicha and Shisiya, it has to be to Shabbos and Melacha. So all I'm doing at the moment is presenting to you the mechanics of what's going on over here. Now, Tanu es nafshei seichem, Inui shu ibad nefesh, and I point out as different girsas, whether it's Ibui, Shuhu Ibur HaNefesh, or Abei Nefesh, whatever it is, it's an Inui of Achilun Shisiya. Now, the Rambam continues, and then he says, Ushashvisa hamuchuyeves me'ela pu'ulois Kulam Bi'omu boy. Now here's an interesting thing. Kulam bi'omu boy Shabbos lachem v'nisas seichem kilu yoyma shechoiva boy hashvisa hamayuchedes b'malachos v'hamaasim, which will come back to this word v'hamaasim. The Arabic is very interesting, but it's premature for this. I just want to get the main idea down, and then we'll get into the words. V'ashvisa hamayuchedes b'mozen aguf v'kiyumoy. So there's a shvisa from Melacha, and there's a hekesh to a shvisa from mozen aguf v'kiyumoy. So I'm not sure over here is the hekesh only to sicha l'chitza nilas hasana tashv lamita, or it's also to achil and shisia. And here the Rambam is being mechadish that he does the same thing that he gets in Mishnah Torah from a different way. The Rambam says that there's a hekesh b'malacha and shvisa hamiyuchedes b'mozen haguf v'kiyumoy. If you're talking about mozen haguf and kiyumoy, you certainly included achila and shisia. So okay, so this is interesting that the Rambam then puts Achil and Shisia in Sefer Mitzvos under Shvisa, and then he ends at the end, Kloima, Hashvisa Tiyeh Mikol Elu Advorim Ad Sheyagia Inui. So somehow the Inui requires everything. Requires not only Achil and Shisia, but also Sicha L'chitza Nilas Hasandal Tashlamit. Now, let's go back before and see a little bit here. The Rambam uses here b'melachos v'hama'asim. The hama'asim is a very strange word in Arabic. It's ashgal, okay? Ibn Tibur translates ma'asim. Kapach has two options, avodos, his askios, something the person is involved with, okay? So, it's interesting, if you look at the Shvisa by Yontif, you'll see he talks about Shvisa Melacha. Here, he adds Shvisa V'ma'asim. And if you do a little research and go back to the Aseh of Shvisa on Shabbos, here it is. Shinatztavinu kufnun dalet, shinatztavinu shed lishbais b'Shabbos, kufnun dalet. And he says, as he goes on, Ube'alonu yis'ale shashvis hazois min ha'malochos hi chayva lonu v'heimaseinu l'avdeinu. Min malochos, okay? So this is a very odd translation. Because the Melachos is really a mistake. Let me just say it like this, because in Melachos, what basically the word that translates Melachos, you look in Kapach, it's Al Ashgal, which means is the word which he translates basically as which he translates basically as his askios and avoidos. So what the Rambam basically is telling us that this ashgal, whatever it is basically not only in for Melacha, but there's something else added on here which you have no clue of what we're talking about. Absolutely no clue. Okay, so here I would suggest the following, okay? The Rambam, one second. What happens here is like this. So the question is the Rambam thinking about another option, another way of saying that Yom Kippur and Shabbos are different from all other days, and as we said, that you need a Shvisa Muchletes, or there's something more going on, okay? Because we know that Yontiv is also in Meleches Avodah, that we know, and not in Meleches Eichel Nefesh. And Shabbos Yom Kippur is also Meleches Eichel Nefesh. Or there's something more going on and something very unique about the mitzvah of Shvisa. So I thought that the clue over here is that the Rambam uses this word of Ashgal only when he talks about the Mitzvas Aseh of Shvisa, but it refers to the Lav of Melacha, both in on Shabbos, Lasasa Kol Melacha, and on Yontiv, the Rambam does not use the word Ashgal. So I would assume that the conclusion is that this word Ashgal is something peculiar about the Mitzvah Aseh. It is not saying that Yom Kippur is different from other days, that Yom Kippur has, there's an Isur of Melecha Seichel Nefesh, but there's something special about Yom Kippur in the Mitzvah Aseh and of Shabbos that has it in Ashgal, which makes it very, very interesting. Okay. This seems to allude to the Rambam in Perich of Daled of Hilchos Shabbos, Halacha Yud Gimel, where the Rambam says that you need Shvisa Hanikeres. And he talks about not being involved the whole day with other things. There's something called Shvisa Hanikeres, which we have to know exactly what that means, but the Rambam, but he only puts the Mitzvah of Shabbos. And he also, in the beginning of Perek Chof Aleph, when he's talking about Tishbais, I feel Dvorim Sheina Melacha, he doesn't say exactly what it is, but it goes, Shvisa goes beyond Melacha. On one hand, you get the impression it's going beyond Melacha. On the other hand, you have to ask yourself a very different question. Because if you look back in Kuf Nun Daled, there's an amazing thing. Because he uses the word Ashgal not necessarily for the mitzvah Shvisa, which applies to man himself, but even to his behemoth. Ubei Alona Yis'aleh, Shashvisa Azois, which Kapach strangely interprets in Malachis, but this is Al Ashgal. He chayva lanu ulebehemosenu ulaavdenu. So whenever the strange thing is going on, it includes also behemoths. So I'm not sure what shvusta is by behemoths, but I can imagine talking about a shvisa nikeres, and the question is, maybe that would apply to behemoths also. But the Rambam is stressing over here in the Aseh of shvisa something very, very interesting. And you'll notice also, just for us now, in Kuf Nun Hey, excuse me, let me see, Kuf the next mitzvah, in Kuf Samach, 1 second. Yeah. You look in Kuf Samach Hey, in the Aseh, mitzvah chomesh b'shishim umeya, hatzivu shnitztavinu, lishbois biyoim zeh, min ha-melochos v'ho-avodos. So guess what? He's very clear about this, that he says, min al-tzna, which are melochos, and al-ashgal. So the Rambam is very serious when he talks about Shabbos and Yom Kippur, the Aseh, that includes this ashgal. And he says it twice by Yom Kippur, both between the hekesh of Mozen Aguf Kiyumoy to Melacha and Avodos, and also in the Mitzvah of Shvisa Melacha and Yom Kippur. So I'm telling you, there's something very, very interesting going on here. Now, I just want to tell you, the Rambam uses this expression not only by Yom Kippur and Shabbos, by the Mitzvah Shvisa, he uses it by the Azhara of Leviim, by Avodas Kohanim, and Loisa Se'ayin Beis, in the Azhara of Chrisha B'klai Kerem, B'klai Behema, excuse me, Chrisha B'klai Behema, and Avodas Bizoyon B'Eved Ivri. So I would suggest that he's using this term when it's not limited to classical melachos, but any cherisha and aveda which would be helpful for the Sada. I'm not sure exactly. It doesn't have to be, you can plow, you can dig up the land. When he's talking about Avodas Levim Kohanim, if Levim do Avodas Kohanim, any Avodah which the Levim do of the Kohanim, or any Avodas B'zoyin in Levi, it's not a limit, it's a broad category of his askus. That's what I can imagine. But I'm not sure exactly. But I think the most telling detail over here in this whole thesis is the fact that Ram does not use this word of Ashgal by the Ashor of Melacha, only by the Aseh of Shvisa. Now, I just want to tell you now, let's get now to there's a very basic difference between the Aseh of Inui and the Aseh of Shvisa. In Inui, there's also going to be a Lav and a Chiv Kores. And what we know is plain Shvisa, the other Inuyim of Sicha, Chitzin, Sasando, and Kashamita, there's no Ashora and there's no Kores. Okay, so I would tell you like this. Let's see Lashon Rambam in Perik Aleph of Hilchos Shvisas also Halacha Dalet and Hey. Ram says Mitzvas Aseh Acheres Yesh B'Yom HaKippurim V'hi Lishbois Boi Me'achilu Shisir Shenema Ta'anu Es Nafshei Seichem Mipi Shmuel Lomdu Inui Shuhu Lenefesh Zeh Hatzim V'chol Hatzom Boi Ki Mitzvas Aseh V'chol Ha'oichel V'shoyse Boi Bittel Mitzvas Aseh. The Achila Shisia is a Bittel Mitzvas Aseh. And he says also V'oval Aloisase Shenema ki kol hanefesh asher lo yisauna be'etzem hayoyim hazeh v'nichasa. The raya, there's a lo yisaseh, is his kores. U'me'acha she'ones hakosu kores l'mi shelo yinis'aneh lo ma'anu shemusholim bo onu boy al achilu shesir v'chol ha'oichel v'shoyse boy b'sheged chayev kol ben chatas kavur. So the Ram has something very important over here. That in this Aseh, there's a Lois Aseh and a Chiv Kores, which is very different from the Shvisa, from Sicha, Rechitza, Nilas Hasan Tashtamita. There he says, in Halacha Hey, he says, Mitzvah lishbois mikol elu kederch sheshoyves me'achila u'shesir. Shenema Shabbos Shabbosin. Shabbos linyan achila v'Shabbosin linyan elu. Linyan elu. He's talking about Sicha, Rechitza, Tashas Hamita, and Nidas Hasandel. The Ein Chayovim Kores or Korban Elo Al Achilu Shesiyah Bovad. Avol Imlochatz or Isoch or Noal or Baal or Baal Makanos and Makas Mandus. Okay. So what comes out? A very important thing that the Ika Mitzvah is the Ika Mitzvah is Inui from Achilun Shasiyah. And that's the Chiv Kolis, and that is an Ashor. And when it comes to the Shari Nuyim, there's only an Aseh, and there's no Kolis, and there's no Lav. The question here is that the construct that the Rambam has. We discussed it by Sefer Sa'omer, when it says by Sefer Sa'omer, there's a mitzvah say, Lisbo Shavueh, and then he says, mitzvah Lisbo Yomeh. And here he says, the mitzvah Lis'ana is Me'achilu Shasiyah. And then there's also a mitzvah, Lishbois Me Shari Nuyim. And maybe that's what Rambam has in mind, that's the Ika mitzvah. The Ika mitzvah is Achilu Shasiyah, but there's a Chiyuv, and it's not the Ika mitzvah, and that's mitzvah. It's not a new mitzvah, minyan mitzvahs. It's a Chiyuv subsumed under this mitzvah, but it's not the Ika mitzvah. So this I'd like to share with you, if it's correct. But just before we go on to evaluate the other place in the Rambam that he might have this construct, is a very interesting thing. What the Rambam says over here is that even though this is under Shvisa, there's a hekesh between the Shvisa and the Shvisa of Melacha to the Shvisa of Tzorkei HaNefesh, Kiyum HaNefesh. But the Rambam says at the end over here, which is very important, he says, Kloima, HaShvisa Tiyeh Mikol Eila Hadvorim Ad Sheyagia Inui. So the Rambam is doing two interesting things. He's putting together, when he talks about Ashvisa Meyuchedes V'Mozen Aguf V'Kiyumoi, that the Shvisa has within it not only Achilun Shasiyah, but also other Dvar, because there's Mozen Aguf V'Kiyumoi, and he says that even though this is called Shvisa, it really is Lahashlim Din. It's a Kef Lahashlim, it's a Din, and it really is to help us fulfill and come to conclusions about Inui. That's what we have in the Rambam. Now, I'd like to show you how this plays itself out. You have, I mentioned Sefer Sa'omer. That's in Perek Zayin Alach Chav Beis V'Chos Tefillah B'Sofen. Mitzvah say Lispo Sheva Shabbos Tmimois Miyoim Havo Sa'omer Shenem Usvartem Lochem Imochas HaShabbos Sheva Shabbos Tmimois U'Mitzvah Limnois Hayomim Im HaShavuos Shenem Tisbu Chamishim Yoim. So the mitzvah is not the Ika mitzvah, but it's a chiyuv subsumed under the mitzvah. And we explained why that might be so when we were doing the mitzvah of Sefer Sa'omer. Now, this might be also in Ibud Avodah Zarah. The mitzvah say to Ma'abed Avodah Zarah. In Perek Zayin, of Hilchos Avodah Zarah, Loch Aleph, the Rambam writes like this. Mitzvas hi la'abed avodah zarah u'mishamsheho v'chol hana'asim b'shvilo shenemar aved tavedun eis kol ha'makoymes v'nemar ki im koi sa'asu lahem v'chule v'goyme u'be'eretz Yisrael mitzvah. He says the mitzvah say, but in Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah. What mitzvah? Lildoif achrea ad shenoi v'roisa mikol artzeinu. B'chutz la'aretz this doesn't exist. So there's a separate chiyuv. The ikar mitzvah is iber avodah zarah, but there's a separate chiyuv lildoif achrea avodah zarah, which is a mitzvah, which is subsumed under the general mitzvah, but it's only in Eretz Yisrael. It's not the ikar mitzvah. Lildoif achrea avodah zarah. So that's one case that I found, this construct, mitzvah say, and then he says afterwards mitzvah. You find other cases. In Hilchos Tmim Musafim, Perek Beis Halacha Aleph, goes like this. Mitzvah say, liyos it's basically passive by having if the fire is burning on the mizbeach, you kind of mitzvah. Mitzvah say liyos eish yikoida ala mizbeach tomid. Shenema eish tomid tukar ala mizbeach. Afal pisho eish yodu min hashamayim. Mitzvah. Lahavi eish min hahedyet. Shenema v'nos mene'ana kohanim eish al mizbeach. Kloima. So what should we say over here? That the ikar mitzvah is there should be eish al mizbeach, but there's a chiyuv to augment the mitzvah that you should bring min hahedyet. Umit is a mitzvah. Afal pi. She'eish yod min hashamayim, mitzvah lahavi eish min hahedyet. It's an interesting thing if this is true. Now, I'm going to show you 3-4 other cases that I'm not sure exactly what to do with them. You see each one with their own merit. You have like this. Perek Zayin of Hilchos Sefer Torah, Halacha Aleph. Mitzvah say, I'll call ish v'ish mi-Yisrael. Lichtev Sefer Torah le'atzmoi. Shenema v'ata kisvu lachem es ashira azeis. This is lachem es ashira, period. Kloima, kisvu lachem Torah sheyesh bo shira. Zo, lefi she'en kais of the Torah, parshis. V'af al pi shehenichoy loy avois of Sefer Torah mitzvah lichtev misheloi v'im kosve v'yodoi harihu kilu me'al sina v'meni yodei lichtev is kaisen lachir. So what happened over here? This certainly is not similar to the other cases, because in the other cases the Rambam has psukim to support the secondary mitzvah or mitzvah, the mitzvah lildoif ba'artzeinu, the mitzvah of Sfiras Yoimei, the mitzvah here of Inui, Shar Inui, Yom Kippur. Here there's no separate pasuk. It's v'ata kisvu lachem es ashir azeis. But the question is, what happens over here? Is the Rambam saying that the ikar mitzvah is ksiva Sefer Torah, and even if you yesh me'avoisav, you mekayim the mitzvah, but is a separate chiyuv to augment the mitzvah, not to rely on shel avoisav, but the case of Mishnah, that's what he's saying. The afal pi sheiniach lo avoisav Sefer Torah mitzvah lichtoi mishaloi. Or is he saying just the opposite? And the construct is not necessarily true. That if you get Ma'avoisav, you're not Makayim the mitzvah. And the mitzvah is only if you do this. Then it's a whole different approach and a whole different idea. That's one of the examples. Next example. Hilchos Isur Mizbeach. The case is like this. Hilchos Isur Mizbeach, Perek Ha'aloch Yir Aleph. Mitzvah say, Limloyach kol korbanos kleilim shiyalu lemizbeach. Shenema al kol korban chatak lemelech. It's a mitzvah. Al kol korban chatak lemelech. Ve'en lecha dov shekol mizbeach b'loi melech. Chutz miyayin l'sochin v'adom v'eitzim. V'dov ze kabbalah. V'ein loy mikol lismoich alav. Then he says another few words. Mitzvah limloyach habosa yofa yofa kimoleach bosa letzli shemahapich esa eva umoleach v'imoach kol shehu afilu begalga melech acher kosher. So then it means the Ika mitzvah requires even galga echad. But mitzvah, to augment the mitzvah, you can augment the mitzvah with malicha ki bosa litzli shemahapich esa'eva. But here also there's no separate pasuk. But the Ram is saying a mitzvah, it augments the mitzvah. So the question is two different constructs. I'm not sure what's happening over here. And I'll show you another construct which will give everyone food for thought the next time they say a drasha at a bris milah. The Rambam in Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph, and Hilchos Milah. Like this. Milah mitzaseh shechiyom alei kolos shenemu ol zocha asher lo yomu eis b'sao losay v'nichos hanefesh ehi me'amer. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is even on yourself. The mitzvah on yourself to make sure you're not an orel. The orel zocha. This is mitzvahs aseh shechayov molei kolos shenemu v'ol zocha asher lo yomu eis b'sao losay v'nichos hanefesh ehi me'amer. Then he says, umitzvah al ha'av lomu es b'noi. Umitzvah, the same construct. V'al ha'av lomu es avodov. Yilid bayis umiknas kesef. Oval ha'av oi ha'odom v'loi ma'al oisoi bitol mitzvahs aseh. V'eino chayev kolos she'en kakolos tolui ela ba'ol atzmoi ubezdin mitzuv v'lomo oisoi oisoi habein o ha'evet bizmano v'enicho b'Yisrael. So what's going on over here? Is this an Ika mitzvah and not an Ika mitzvah? Or to augment, there's a mitzvah say for Mila. And if you want to augment the mitzvah, is the father should do it. And maybe there are. So the question is a separate chayv as an Ika mitzvah? Or maybe that's everything like that. There's a separate chiv and svira. That the mitzvah svira is shvuei, and in yoimei is only to augment the mitzvah. And you're going to say it over here also, that the mitzvah, that Aseh is Tanu, is Achil and Shesiyah, and Shvisa, from Sicha and Rechitza and Tashamita and Yisasandus to augment the mitzvah. That's what it means. So I'm just not sure whether you're talking about the Ika mitzvah, not Ika mitzvah. Then, and one more case that I found, and that's basically I presented you, I think, all the evidence, is a case in Perek Yud of Hilchos Ma'aser Kabbalas Halacha Aleph. Achilas achatos v'oshom mitzvah Aseh. So you know, achilas kohanim and koche kochim is achila mechaperes v'ochol asher kupu behem. Shene'ema v'ochol is asher kupu behem. HaKohanim oichlim v'bailim miskaplim. V'hu adin l'shah hakochim she'oichlin oison HaKohanim she'achiloson mitzvah. Here it's a different construct. It doesn't say mitzvah, achilos a mitzvah in terms of the noun, not as a verb telling you it's incumbent upon you to do something, but that's the mitzvah. So maybe over here you shouldn't quote this, and it just means that it's nigreres acha mitzvah, and this is not in achilas kochim kalim and kohanim. It should be not connected to this. That's what I had. That's how I tried to research this issue. I'm not 100% clear whether it means mitzvah means to augment the mitzvah, or it means the ikka mitzvah is X. Mitzvah is you don't have the ikka mitzvah. It's beyond the ikka mitzvah, or maybe it means the same thing. If you're augmenting it, it means the ikka mitzvah is X, and you can augment. Now, I want to share with you something else. If I'm not mistaken, and I have a chance to check it out, I think I heard this from my Rebbe named Reb Chaim. I just want to read to you a Rambam, which is very interesting. In Perek Gimel of Hilchos Avodas Yom Kippurim, Halacha Zayin. He's talking about the Siyam Mishaleach, that there was sukkos and there was food and drink for the kohen bringing the Siyam Mishaleach to Lazozo. I'll call sukkah v'sukkah oimim loy hare mozoim v'hare mayim. There's food and drink. Im koshel koichai v'tzoch le'achol oicha. So it doesn't say here that the kohen over here is a state of pikuach nefesh, a suffix pikuach nefesh, that you have to, that you're allowed to feed him. But the Ram's lashon is, im kosher koichai, he's a little weak. B'tzoch lecho, he's allowed to eat. So remember, I think, I already said, Reb Chaim concluded from here, that the Ram's opinion is that Kedusha Yom of Achila and the Kedusha Yom of Melacha is one Kedusha. And since there's a Dichui Chal in Melacha Mishum Aveideh, there's a Dichui Chal in the Tzom itself, Mishum Aveideh. And it's enough if it's Serch, even though there's no Pekuach Nefesh. That is what I would call Reb Chaim said. All I want to tell you is that you can bolster this opinion, this concept with the Rambam over here. Because doesn't the Rambam over here equate Shvisa of Melacha to Shvisa from Achilu Shesiyah? He says, listen again. He says, Vashvisa, Ushvashvis Mucheves Meila Pulis Kulam Be'omru Boy, Shabbos Shabbosin He lochem v'nisras nafshei seichem ki ilu yoima shechayva boya shvisa hamiyuchedes b'melachos v'amaasim, which is melacha, v'ashvisa hamiyuchedes b'mozon aguf v'kiyuma. It's included not only achil and shisiya, but all the Inui. Okay, but it means there's a hekesh between achil and shisiya and Melacha. So since there's a dichui in the Kedush Hayom legabe Melacha, there's a dichui in the Kedush Hayom legabe Tzayim. In kosher koichai, he's allowed to. So that, I think, becomes very, very interesting. That helps the Pchat. Now, I'm very confused about what's going on over here. Maybe it's my problem. I'll explain to you. You see, it's a very odd thing over here. I'll explain to you what my problem is. If you look over here in Mitzvah Samachay, the mitzvah is a mitzvah achomesh v'shishim u'meya hatzivui shestavinu lishbais b'yoyim zeh min ha'melachos v'avodos v'omer Shabbos Shabboson hi lochem. So what happens? There's a mitzvah saying minyan mitzvahs of Shabbos Shabboson, and Shabbos Shabboson says that there's a mitzvah say of Shvisa Melacha, avodas and Yom Kippur. How can you use the same pasuk if Shabbos Shabboson is the Isa Melacha to also use it for the Inuyim? And it's a very odd thing. And here, yeah. You see, what you could have said is that here you can work on two levels, and this is a very important idea, but the question is it true? Could you take the pasuk both on the level of Pshuta Shel Mikra, and the Pshuta Shel Mikra, it's Melacha, and then you have a Pirush Makubal to tell you that it includes Inuyim, and therefore you can quote it as the Mitzvah say in Kuf Samachay, and also as a drasha to tell you that Shar Inuyim augment in because of Shabbos and the Hekesh Shabbos, and which is a Kabbalah Pirush Makubal augment Inui, and Achiagia Kadesh Yusago Inui, Achiagia Inui, whichever translation you want. This would be beautiful and very nice, and I can stop here and everyone would be happy. The only problem is, if you go back to the Aseh Kuf Samach Gimel, you have a very strange thing going on. Because he says, Atzivush Zavinu lishbois biyoim echad b'tishrei, v'hu amroi b'chodesh hashvi'i b'echad l'chodesh yeh lochem Shabboson. So does the word Shabboson mean Tishbois? In Pshuta Shamikra? Comes the Ram and says, Kva Kodem L'cho, L'shoinom, Bi'omrum, Hai Shabboson Asehu, which the Ram says before also. What do you mean, L'shoinom, Hai Shabboson Asehu? And he quotes this also in Kuf Nun Tes. Kloima, Shashvisa B'chol Yoim, he says, yeah. Kloima. Hai Shabbos and Asehu in Kuf Nun Tes. Kloima shekol yoim shoima boy Shabbos and hu ki'ilu oma shvois oy tishbois. It means the Matiki Ashmur say the word Shabbosoin, which is a noun, is really can be used as a verb and a command, the verb in a command form. So that means that the Pshuta Shamikra is not operating over here. And there's a Pirush Mekubal telling us that Shabbosin is Melacha. So you can use the Pirush Mekubal on one hand to tell you that there's an Isa Melacha and Shabbosin, and the other hand also use it to tell you something about Inui, and there's no stira necessarily because it's Shabbosin. It's very odd, but something like that seems to be happening here. Or you can say something else. The Ram doesn't seem to point it out. The question is, B'chlal, how do you know Shabbos has to do with Inui? Because it says, Shabbosin Yelochem v'nisim es nafshesechem. So the Torah says that there's some relationship between the Melacha and Inui. So the question is, the Ram doesn't seem to play this out and say we're talking about two different Shabbosin, and the pasuk is written twice in the Torah, but he just basically says that the word Shabbosin means Melacha, Shabbosin, because of the Kabbalah of the Matiki Ashmur. And also he says, on the other hand, a very odd thing, he says that you can learn out something about Inui on Yom Kippur. This, I think, I should leave as it's so chiyum, but it has to be thought about, I would say. And Mitzvah Hashem, next week we'll pick up the Mitzvah Aseh of Leisha Basukha. Maybe I'll add something on the Aseh of Yom Kippur Aseh, of Melacha by Yom Kippur. Have a great week.